A good strategic move is how a leading human rights lawyer describes refugee Behrouz Boochani's bid to turn a book tour in New Zealand into a longer stay. The Kurdish-Iranian writer and journalist travelled to New Zealand from Papua New Guinea on UNHCR documents and a visitor's visa in November to speak at a literary festival. Now, that 30-day visa has now expired, but Mr Boochani is still in the country. Mr Boochani, who fled Iran for fear of persecution, had been detained by Australia on Manus Island for 6 years before being sent to PNG. Last month, he told media he had been accepted by the United States for resettlement. When the award-winning writer arrived in New Zealand last month, he said he would not seek asylum here for now. But Behrouz Boochani has confirmed to Checkpoint he's still in the country and will be until at least the new year. He didn't answer our questions about whether he's applied for asylum. I asked human rights lawyer Craig Tuck what a person's status is once their visitor's visa expires.
Technically, if you don't have a visa, you're subject to be deported, subject to any other application you must make. And in this case, I presume there's an application. I don't know the details of the case, let me be frank about that, but as I understand it, it may well be the situation that an oral or written application is made.
So, Craig, is that as simple as phoning immigration and saying, this is my intention, I was here on a visitor's visa and I'm going to seek asylum? Is it that simple?
Yes, I think you can do that even as you come through an immigration checkpoint, and the application can be made orally just by talking and saying that's what I'm doing. Or in writing, it then needs to be signed and submitted.
What we do know from Mr Boochani himself was that he is part of a refugee exchange between the US and Australia. And he has made comments to the effect that he has the opportunity to go to America. If you have a country that has said, we will take you,
yes,
how does that play when you are then saying you are seeking asylum in another country?
Well, it's a fascinating situation because, of course, somebody can seek asylum anywhere, of course, that they touch base on or in the country, subject to any other procedure. So he's certainly not excluded from that. But I guess the question is, well, if he's got somewhere else to go, why does he need to come here? And at the heart of that question, then, if we start to look at, first of all, the discretion of the US and whether they can exercise in an arbitrary fashion, given that he's not in Papua New Guinea anymore, whether that technically has changed the American position. But of course, the American position could change in a heartbeat. It could change as the wind changes, as we've seen their global sort of strategy move and shift depending on the way the wind's blowing or the political will at the time. There is a concern, I would have thought, that if you are caged in Papua New Guinea, and we're seeing thousands, possibly tens of thousands in the US, caged asylum seekers in the US while those sorts of determinations are being made, is he swapping one cage for another even if he could get there? Or would there be an arbitrary decision in the meantime, which would mean that whilst immediately available supposedly in the US, that could change over time? He's entitled to apply in New Zealand, given the certificate that he's got, given the procedures that he's followed, and looking at his contribution, it's pretty significant and would be a great value to New Zealand in any event, I would have thought. Very talented, motivated man that is perfectly entitled to avail himself of the processes that we've got here. So,
well, that raises the question, doesn't it? That does having a book tour and a few photos with politicians assist your position?
Well, it may well do. It may well do, but I guess it comes back to what is the nature of the test and what is the threshold, and whether or not if he was to go somewhere else, I mean, he's certainly at risk at some parts of the world, whether or not that he's indicating or showing to New Zealand that he's got a contribution to make, that he's got a well-founded fear elsewhere, but he's not going to be here as a freeloader. He's not going to be here as somebody that's potentially dangerous to our society and to our way of life, and that he is somebody that can really contribute, quite separate to his application, but he's kind of providing an asset side of the equation, not just a downside.
So just to be clear, regardless of whether someone else has extended the opportunity for him to settle in their country, in this case, we believe America, he is within his legal rights to seek asylum anywhere else he chooses.
Absolutely. And in fact, as I see the definition, the situation that he is he's landed in New Zealand. He's on New Zealand soil. He's entitled to make an application. That any argument that suggests, well, he potentially goes elsewhere, well, he's not. He doesn't have nationality in any other country. He doesn't in the US. I mean, that is the option that's being provided as the alternative. And my view and submission would be that could change quickly. And in any event, even if that relationship is maintained, who knows what sort of situation he's going into, given the changing landscape and having to navigate that situation in the US.
Immigration, would you think, this would have been in the forefront of their mind when they issued a visa to a person of this profile who was clearly coming from Papua New Guinea, had been in camps in Manus Island? Would immigration have been thinking, or should they have been thinking, it is likely or probable that this man will choose to stay on here and seek asylum?
I think they'd be incredibly naive if they didn't consider those sorts of options, as they would do with anybody coming. And clearly there were no SIS flags or any other alerts on his file as he came into New Zealand, that there would have been a due process followed, and that immigration would be well aware of potential other applications that he could make when he was on New Zealand soil.
Can you see why he may not want to go to the United States?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I was in his situation, I think any citizen in his situation, once you've got to New Zealand and there's the potential to stay here, we have quite a different, in my view, a much kinder landscape and much more welcoming and accommodating than the harsh reality of Australia and their detention camps, and the US and their camps, should there be, an interpretation that changes from their perspective, regardless of what the UN have said about it.
So what would your advice be to him as a lawyer then? Stay in New Zealand?
It's a great place, and you're a very talented man that could contribute a lot. And I imagine, without going into the details of his case, that he's supported by a lot of people in the substance of his claim, but also in the process by which he gets there. I'm not sure what his actions have been to date in relation to this, but in general terms, this probably was quite a good strategic move, I would have thought.
And that's human rights lawyer Craig Tuck.